This is a recording of page 352 to 357. A matter of class, plebeians versus patricians. The legend of Horatius shows that the Romans were loyal to their new republic and willing to fight to defend it. After Porsena's attempt to capture Rome, the city continued to fight frequent wars with neighboring cities and tribes, but Rome did not fall. While the Romans eventually succeeded in getting rid of tyrannical kings, the young republic faced more challenges. One challenge rose from the common people. Even though no king held absolute power over them, they did not at first share much of the power or privileges of the new republic. Most of Rome's common people were farmers who tilled the land. A few were wealthy and had large estates, but most were poor commoners who worked hard to survive. They didn't have as many rights as the patricians enjoyed. They could hold public office, but few did. They weren't allowed to marry patricians. Being poor, they often found themselves in debt to moneylenders, and the moneylenders were usually patricians. Roman laws about debt were quite harsh. A commoner who could not repay what he owed could find his property seized and himself locked up in a patrician's private prison. He could be sold into slavery along with the rest of his family. He could even be put to death. The most common outcome, though, seems to have been debt bondage, in which the debtor became a slave to the moneylender while he worked to pay off his debt. Rome's frequent wars with its neighbors made the situation worse. Ordinary citizens were expected to serve as unpaid soldiers when necessary and even supply their own equipment. Long campaigns placed harsh burdens on these families and drove them deeper into debt. Invading armies made life even more difficult as they destroyed farms and plundered harvests. Rome suffered economic decline throughout the 5th century BC. Whenever possible, patricians expanded their estates at the expense of small landholders, turning the former owners into debt bondsmen who had to work the land. Year after year, the common people suffered in silence until finally they could stand it no longer. One day, it is said, an old man suddenly appeared in Rome's marketplace. He was a pitiful sight, thin and sickly and dressed in rags. When asked how he had fallen so low, he bared his shoulders and revealed the marks of cruel blows. Then he pointed to even older scars on his breasts, signs of honorable wounds he'd received in war. It turned out the old fellow had once fought bravely for Rome. When he returned from war to enjoy what he hoped would be the fruits of peace, he discovered that his fields had been burned and his cattle had been driven off. He fell deeper and deeper in debt. Finally, his creditor made him a slave and whipped him savagely until he was near death. The man's story infuriated the common people. They refused to fight in the army, and in 494 BC threatened to build their own city. These angry citizens banded together and called themselves plebeians. In Latin, the word plebes means the common people. Rome's plebeians, or plebes for short, were made up of both poor and wealthy commoners. The poor were angered by their landlessness, the burden of military service, and debt bondage. Poor and wealthy plebeians alike demanded more political power. Rome's patricians gradually realized they would have to change their ways. They grudgingly gave the plebeians a greater say in Rome's republic. Patricians and plebeians in the Roman Republic. Plebeians complained that there was no set of written laws applying to everybody. Instead, the patricians administered justice according to traditional rules known only by priests, who were patricians themselves. In 450 BC, the laws of Rome were finally written down and published as the 12 Tables, which were posted for all to see. When the plebeians saw how many laws there were to follow, they weren't happy. Still, Rome was extremely proud of its 12 Tables. Over the centuries, the Romans would go on to prove their genius for making laws. Bit by bit, plebeians chipped away at patrician privileges and won more rights. In the 5th century BC, they gained the right to marry patricians. In the 4th century, they won big changes. Debt bondage was much reduced. A Roman citizen could no longer be put into chains because he owed money. Plebeians gained rights in government as well. Two officials called consuls were responsible for overseeing much of the government. In the 4th century, Romans decided that one of the consuls must always be a plebeian. The consuls were powerful men, but there were limits to their authority. They were elected to serve just 1-year terms, and either consul could forbid the actions of the other, so that no single man would hold too much power. The two consuls shared power and executed laws approved by the Senate and the assemblies. The Senate was the most powerful body in the government. Senators came from wealthy landowning families, so the Senate often ignored the interests of the poor. Not all senators were patricians, but most were. Unlike the consuls who served brief 1-year terms, the senators served for life. In their long robes called togas, edged in purple, they proposed laws and tried to figure out the best path for the republic. For a long time, the Senate ratified laws passed by Rome's assemblies. Over time, the republic developed two assemblies, two bodies of citizens that helped make laws and run the republic. The Centuriate Assembly included all citizens, but patricians had the greatest influence on its decisions. The Tribal Assembly also included all citizens, but was set up in such a way that the wealthiest could not determine its course. During the 5th and 4th century BC, despite social strife, the Romans succeeded in creating a government based on law in which many people had a voice. Think about some of the successful features of the Republic. Laws clearly spelled out, two annually elected leaders called consuls, two representative assemblies, and one powerful Senate. The Roman Republic, while by no means perfect, was still a remarkable achievement for its time. The Republic would last for about 500 years. The Romans told many stories of heroes who risked their own fortunes and lives to save the Republic. One of the most famous is the story of Cincinnatus. The 5th century BC Roman was a real statesman and general who wanted Rome to remain a republic. Here is the legend of the great hero. The story of Cincinnatus. Lucius Quincius Cincinnatus was one of the most powerful men in the Senate that ruled ancient Rome. He was also one of the most honorable. When his grown son became involved in a scandal, Cincinnatus did all he could to help the young man start over. But the devoted father lost all his wealth. Cincinnatus and his wife, Rusilla, moved to a small farm west of the Tiber, where the senator himself had to plow the fields and dig the ditches. Cincinnatus did not complain that he now spent more time in a simple tunic, working the earth, than in his senator's toga. Nor did the Romans lose sight of Cincinnatus's great worth. One day, when the aging man was at the plow, covered with grime and sweat, he saw several men on horseback galloping toward him. They seemed worried and in a terrible rush. "What is wrong?" Cincinnatus asked. The men had been sent by the Senate. First, they asked a blessing for Cincinnatus and their country. Then they urged, "Put on your toga, Cincinnatus, and hear the words of the Roman Senate." Cincinnatus called for his wife to bring him the toga. While she was getting it, he wiped the dirt and sweat from his arms and hands as best he could. Then he put on the toga. "Now tell me," he said. The men told him the Roman army was in dire peril. The forces of Rome were surrounded by an enemy tribe on Mount Algidus. 5 Roman horsemen had managed to escape and tell the Senate of impending doom. In great excitement, the men before him said, "Oh, why, Cincinnatus, we come to tell you that the Senate has given you complete power to rule in this time of emergency. We greet you as our dictator. Come now and lead us out of peril." "Dictator!" cried the astonished Cincinnatus. "The senators beg you to come to Rome immediately," said one of the messengers. "They have named you dictator, so you will have the power to act quickly and do whatever is necessary to save the republic." Cincinnatus did not hesitate. He mounted a horse the men had brought with them, and they galloped away. He left his plow standing in the field. All the way to Rome he worried about the army's defenses might already be failing. As a ferry carried Cincinnatus across the Tiber, senators came out to greet him. So did his 3 sons, including the one who had caused Cincinnatus so much shame. All 3 wanted to fight for Rome, and they were ready to take orders. Not everyone was happy to see Cincinnatus. By now, most citizens of the Republic had heard that the Senate had made him dictator. Many didn't like the idea of giving one man so much power. As Cincinnatus passed through the streets, they watched him suspiciously and wondered what he would do. Cincinnatus posted men at the city walls to watch for the enemy, the Equi, when he went to his private rooms and mapped out a plan to save Rome. By dawn he was ready. He suspended all public activity in the city. He ordered all shops to close and forbade the transaction of any kind of business. He ordered every man of military age to report for duty before sunset, equipped with weapons as well as food and water for 5 days. Cincinnatus said that old men, women, and children should help the new soldiers get ready. Everyone in Rome spent the day fixing food, gathering wood, and preparing weapons. Even those who didn't like Cincinnatus followed his orders. They were afraid of what he might do if they disobeyed. By sunset, the new soldiers were ready. Most assumed they would rest that night and start out fresh the next morning to meet the enemy in battle. But Cincinnatus wanted to surprise the Equi. He led the soldiers away that very night and attacked the Equi while they were sleeping. The Equi were so surprised that they soon surrendered and begged for mercy. Cincinnatus knew that if the Equi had won, they would have slaughtered the Roman soldiers, but he said he did not want the blood of the Equi. All he wanted was their confession that they were beaten. He told them to admit their losses by marching under a Roman yoke made of 3 spears. The Equi soldiers marched under the yoke and returned to their homes in the mountains. Cincinnatus returned triumphantly to Rome. He led his soldiers along with the army that had been trapped on Mount Algidus through the city's streets. Everyone cheered because they knew Cincinnatus had saved Rome. But now, what would Cincinnatus do? Some Romans feared that he might try to remain dictator, or maybe even make himself king for the rest of his life. As dictator, he would certainly enjoy an easier life. He would not have to push a plow or dig a ditch or worry about rain for his crops. His meals would come to him on gilded trays. He would wear fine togas, and people would do what he told them to do. But Cincinnatus did not believe Rome should be ruled by one man, for then it would cease to be a republic. Cincinnatus believed important public decisions should be made by many different people, debating and working together, as they did in the Roman Senate. So once again, Cincinnatus surprised everyone by resigning. He went home to his wife Priscilla and his farm along the Tiber River. He picked up his plow just where he had left it in the field 16 days before. In the centuries since, Cincinnatus has been remembered as the model citizen, willing to drop what he is doing to help when his country needs him, but just as willing to give up power when his help is no longer required. And then read about the American Cincinnatus, George Washington. That's the end of pages 352 to 357.